Hello and good evening. Hello everybody. Everybody.
Hello.
Hello everybody. I feel like that's a good way to start a kids show, eh? Hello boys and girls. Oh, we should totally start every show like that. Hello
You
boys
kids
and
want
girls.
to talk about politics?
Hey man, hey guys, hey everybody, welcome to the show. Big hairy news for another night, Thursday the 26th of May. Holy shit balls, it's June next week. Don't quite know how that happened. But it's official. It's June next week. Good to be back with you, George. We've got to have the daily update, George. Jorge, how are you feeling? How's the recovery?
Yeah, no, totally back to normal pretty much. I think there is these slight dips of depression.
Yep.
And fogginess. I don't think I'll ever be the same ever again.
I read
monkeypox.
I read a message from someone today who had COVID recently, and she was saying, "Oh my God, whatever you do, just make sure if you get it, let's do that, eh? If you get it, you rest. And she was saying that it's not that she had it again, it's that she had like getting relapses. So just make sure you rest up well and don't push yourself too hard, bro. It's we got to make sure we look after you. I mean, you are the backbone of this whole thing. Without you, there would be one less person here.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, I don't know why you say it. It's literally not, but...
What about you, Chewy? Haven't seen you for a week. Obviously, there's been a lot in the news over the last week that you've been involved with here, but a lot going on. How are you? What's going on? And what the fuck is on your head?
It's a Chewy. It's Chewbacca. And I think it's important that if I'm going to wear it, that I just have completely emotionless face, just no reaction, no joy.
It's quite a good match to your beard color, actually. The face of that, it does actually. It's you.
It has been mentioned. I've got a hoodie that goes with it.
Really? I was saying that hoodie that
terrifying.
You're wearing. I've been doing stuff in the background right up until we started, but when I saw you in that hoodie from a distance. Like this is a little icon on my screen. It sort of looked like you were wearing one of those medieval ruffles, you know, that the men used to wear, the ruffles.
Oh, very stylish.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I thought I didn't realize we were doing King Arthur's court tonight, but obviously we're not because it's a big heavy pullover. Anything going on? I had an interesting experience today. My dog got paparazzi'd. That's a first. Driving down the road. Yeah, driving down the road, pulling up at the lights, some 20-something-year-old, cute university student girls, like, looking at my car, taking photos of my dog hanging out the back window. I thought, hang on, that's $1 every time you do that. So I there's a paparazzi dog in the back of my car. I thought that was a bit weird.
It's a funny story about asking for money for photos. It's funny because just before the show started, me and Chewy were sort of realizing that we're in the same sort of music scene in Wellington for a few years there back in the noughties. And anyway, we were on Cuba Street once, and me and my friends wore the uniform, studded jackets and boots, and all looking very punk on Cuba Street. And these sisters, they were like 60 or 70. They came up and they were part of the show, The Great Amazing Race.
Wow.
And they weren't filming, but they were on their off day where they just got to chill out. And usually when tourists took photos of us, we would, demand money from them because, we were, just didn't have much money. But for these lovely sisters who were on their off day from working on a television show, it was all good. So somewhere out there's a photo of these twin 70-year-old sisters and young George with probably a weird mohawk haircut somewhere out there in the ether.
We got to do that one night. We should bring in photos of our previous incarnations or something and just go through them. I have a feeling you might win, George. I don't know, but I just have a feeling. me and my bouncer days with a completely skinned head, like down to the shaving cream and that sort of stuff. So
fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And the big wraparound sunnies on. Hey, we're going to have a chat tonight about a few things. We are going to talk about the Uvalde shooting again, just because it's been 24 hours. There's been some more updates. We're going to have a look at that, and I'm sorry if that's upsetting to some people, or if you just think enough, let's have other stuff. Well, we've got a really I love the art of clown work. You know, whether it's clown work or whether it's bouffon work and amongst the clown, I love a good clown. So David Seymour's coming up, and also a bit later on, we're actually going to have a look. We haven't done this at all, and I have to be honest, I've been keeping a bit of an eye on it, as has the world. The Johnny Depp Amber Heard situation. There was something that happened. When I say today, I guess it means in the last 24-hour cycle. And look, I don't know if this matters in the overall situation, because if someone tells lies in court, but it's about someone who beat them, the lies in court don't seem quite so important. But Amber Heard is being painted in a certain way, and interestingly enough, I think has kind of been picked up by the world that she's kind of the bad guy in this. Like 2 or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, the Me Too movement, when it came out in Believe All Women, it seems now Amber Heard says things and vast numbers of women, girls, males and females, mocking her for her testimony on things like TikTok and stuff. And it's just, I don't know, it seems that we're in a new stage where you know, we no longer believe all women, which I always thought was a little bit weird, because it should have been believe convincing testimony, believe credible sources, you know, whatever that may be. But there does seem to be a bit of a shift, and I wonder if this case is a bit of a cornerstone for a shift away from sort of give this gender or give this sex complete credibility before it even happens. But anyway, look, we'll get into that. It helps
that it's Johnny Depp. Sorry, yeah, we will.
It does. Actually, I did a podcast the other day with Kate Roger, which is going to come out next Tuesday. And one of the things I said to her was it's not that it's difficult, but I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I have a relationship with Johnny Depp, because I've seen him since literally 21 Jump Street on TV, you know, and right through the Edward Scissorhands, and so he's been around all the time. And that's not to say that I'm Team Johnny, because I don't know what the truth is. I've got absolutely no idea, but I don't feel any connection to Amber Heard, but I do to Johnny. So I can see, we talked about media bias last night, George. I can see how my bias plays into this whole equation as well. I'm happy to admit it and say, yeah. So, but there was a really interesting bit today which came out, what looked like that Amber Heard potentially has perjured herself, and I just thought it was an interesting thing to look at, and an interesting the courtroom scene, what happens in the courtroom, and what the lawyers actually do when they can't say something, but they can get to the answer another way. So it's an observation, and we'll have a look at that a bit later on today as well. But look, let's start with David Seymour. David Seymour was on the AM show this morning, so, you know, 13, 14 hours ago. And as wants to happen, was given an opportunity to talk about, you know, Labour, the government, what's going on, inflation. And he started this conversation. And I want to go through this in 2 or 3 bits and talk about what has been said, what hasn't been said, what has been exaggerated, etc., etc., etc. So the first thing David Seymour did was, of course, he blamed the government for inflation and all the ills of the world. Let's have a listen to that.
If you want to solve a problem, you've got to define it. Inflation is too much money chasing after too few goods. We have two...
That point there, where he described what inflation was, just remember that point, right? So it's almost like, for some reason, he's come out saying, just so you're all clear, I do know what inflation is. It's this. So he sets up this definition.
Too few goods, because we have pre-departure testing, we have slow immigration, we have isolation periods that are unworkable, slowing down production. Then we've got a government that is on a spending binge, 5.9 billion of extra spending, that adds in there. And then we've got a Reserve Bank that has been asleep at the wheel, partly because they're not doing their job, frankly, but partly because when this government was first elected, they basically said to the Reserve Bank, don't worry about inflation, and took away the law that said the Reserve Bank must only focus on inflation. So if you define the problem, you've got to get rid of unworkable COVID rules, stop spending like drunken sailors in the beehive, and then put the Reserve Bank's focus back on fighting inflation the way it was before Labor came in.
So when I heard that, I was like, what's this thing he's talking about? Labor taking away laws and instructing the Reserve Bank, etc., etc. So doing a little bit of research today, in fact, it's on the News Hub story, so it's a follow-on from the actual article about it. This is what he's talking about. In 2018, the government introduced a requirement for the Reserve Bank of New Zealand to manage monetary policy in a way that contributed to supporting maximum levels of sustainable employment. This has raised a dilemma for the Reserve Bank over what it should do if faced with the choice between letting inflation get too high or increasing interest rates and possibly damaging employment. And it's not the only new requirement. Since 2021, the Reserve Bank has also been required to consider the impact on the housing market when making decisions. Just before you guys jump in, if you want to, one other thing. Remember how I said, wasn't it interesting how David Seymour really laid out his definition for inflation and what it was? I do wonder how much of that came back to the budget night when a particularly well-versed economist called David Seymour economically illiterate. Let's relive that.
Oh, it just made me angry. It's just so economically illiterate, right? It's like, it's not government spending that is driving inflation. We literally had the UK print 9% inflation yesterday because there is a global inflation crisis. Now, yes, we should talk about inflation. Yes, we should talk about government, but you can't just tell lies about what's going on in the economy. So, this whole thing that apparently it's wasteful government spending that's creating inflation is simply not true. You can say that there's parts of this spending that we don't like,
yes,
and we won't do that because that doesn't add value, it's not efficient, it's not consistent with ideology. That's all fine. But let's not do it on the basis of, I think, what are completely wrong things to say.
So there you go. I just wonder, it seemed quite pointed, David Seymour setting his case for, by the way, this is inflation. I wonder if there was any flow back on that. But there's more to come, but you guys are welcome to jump in now if you want.
Well, I mean, this was the whole thing when we went into COVID, that you had the very real possibility that you're going to stall the entire economy by telling people to stay home, and businesses were going to have to lay off workers to keep their head above water. So the government poured money into the community through these businesses to keep them alive. And we've ended up coming out of COVID with really high employment, and we're in really good shape. And the rest of the world, not so much. And then we go into something like what's happening in Ukraine, and it's had a massive effect on energy production and a massive effect on global food production because Ukraine makes a shit ton of grain. All of these guys turn around and they turn to the government and they go, the government's making inflation run out of control. Last week, inflation in the UK was at 10%. And I don't know how Jacinda's done that, but, what are they going to do? Every time that they've come up with Christopher Luxon said something, or Seymour has said something, they're measures that if they got the Reserve Bank to do it would increase inflation. These guys just don't seem to know what they're talking about. And it's terrifying when they're going, yeah, we'll have a go at government. Thank you.
Yeah, it also is, there was another economist, I'm not going to play it tonight, but we've played it a couple of times, who came out quite strongly saying the government's kind of got nothing to do with inflation and their spending doesn't have it very much. It's all about the Reserve Bank. And the Reserve Bank got it wrong by predicting unemployment. They were predicting that unemployment would be higher. So in other words, because no one's saying that the economy is great, but because it's better than what the Reserve Bank predicted, that's one of the main drivers for inflation. So in other words, if we had higher unemployment, which the government would be criticised for, we'd have lower inflation. So it's like a no-win. So if we had to pick higher inflation but more people employed, or lower inflation and more unemployed, I think the former is probably a better choice for the individual New Zealander than the latter.
Yeah, 100%. One of them, you've got some real control over it. The other one, it can get out of hand real quick.
Mm.
I saw that interview on the AM show with the governor of the Reserve Bank with your favourite morning presenter, Pat.
Yeah.
Did you catch that one?
I saw it, but I started watching it and I went, nah, and turned it off, to be honest.
As usual, he went into an interview hoping to get a particular answer and didn't get it and seemed really, really shocked when the governor was like, yeah, no, we're in good order. Everything's fine.
Hey, let's go on with Mr. Seymour. Mr. Seymour then got an opportunity to comment on gun violence in New Zealand, and got a chance to put a few jabs in on the Prime Minister as well, and what a piss poor job she's doing in America. Let's have a look at this.
Oh, look, I think the Prime Minister is frankly delusional if she thinks we're on top of gun violence in New Zealand.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there already because he's talking about the interview that was on Colbert, and I haven't got that clip to play, but I can tell you very clearly the Prime Minister never said that we're on top of gun violence. In fact, she said very clearly that guns are misused and talked about New Zealand's approach to gun control was not perfect. So that's actually just a blatant lie from Mr. Seymour, because what he's portraying is the Prime Minister went, yeah, we've got it all together. And she absolutely did not say that. Now, love or hate the Prime Minister, whatever your opinion is on it, I think that it's fair for us to quote accurately. And I don't believe that Mr. Seymour knows what he's saying. I don't believe Mr. Seymour doesn't know what was actually said. I believe he is lying for effect, in my honest held belief. So we'll just go on with this a bit more. So he said that the Prime Minister thinks all. Prime Minister never said that, and whatsoever.
They have always had a much bigger problem in the US, but right now our cities are starting to look like LA with these gang wars. The government has always put spin over substance.
So let's have a look at that, shall we, Chewie? Because I've got some numbers for you.
Oh,
so
my God.
New Zealand is starting to look like LA. That is the claim made by Mr. Seymour, okay? So here's an article from about a month ago in Los Angeles. Los Angeles is smaller than New Zealand. Obviously, it's only a city. It's about 3.7, 3.8 million. So let's call it 3/4 the size of New Zealand, give or take. Through April 30th, there'd been 122 homicides in Los Angeles, all gun-related. 6 more than were recorded during the same period in 2021. According to the data, last year ended with 397 killings in the city, the largest annual total since 2006. Now remember, this is gun-related homicides. This is gun-related murders. That's got nothing to do with gun violence. That's just the murders. So Mr. Seymour is claiming that we're turning into Los Angeles. How many gun murders have there been in New Zealand this year, especially to do on the streets of Auckland in gang warfare?
There's
Population
about
of LA's
10 a year.
Really, sorry.
I'm just guessing that there's 10 gun-related deaths a year in New Zealand. I'm just chucking it out there.
These are the things that politicians do to speak to their base and give people the right to phone talkback and go, "Just Auckland's turning into Los Angeles. This gang warfare." This is the thing about politicians, yeah. No one's denying that there might not be issues to figure out, but the exaggeration and manipulation and outright lying by politicians to an issue actually does more harm than it does good. Sorry, Chewie, you were going to say.
I was going to say the actual population of the North Island is really close to the population of the whole of LA.
Right.
But my other point is these guys had a chance to stop this. One of the parts of the recommendations around a gun registration was that a gun register would be a really good idea. We used to do one on paper, and maybe we should digitize it and make it actually useful. So we can identify the pipeline of where these gangs are getting their guns. There's always the thing of like, the law-abiding gun owner. Not every gun owner is law-abiding. Someone's going into places like Gun City or your local gun shop, and they're buying 5 guns, and then they're selling 4 of them to the gangs under the table, cash money. Now, if that guy's name was in the register, and the gun serial numbers were recorded and they turned up in a crime, well, you know where they're coming from. But both National and ACT especially so, didn't want to support that. So they're just talking out both sides of their mouth on this.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty fair for a lot of the politicians, and I guess at the moment we're seeing it more in the opposition, which happens to be ACT and National. But we will continue on with this as Mr. Seymour drops some more pearls of wisdom on gun violence in New Zealand.
This is a government that came in saying gangs are our friends. They even paid them money on government contracts.
They're our friends.
And now they wonder why this is happening. They banned all the guns in New Zealand allegedly. The gangs said we won't hand them in. They said that's okay. It's basically just a policy for people that follow the law.
So again, outright lie. They banned all the guns in New Zealand. Now, some people are saying it's hyperbole. But it's actually that talking point, they banned all the guns in New Zealand, will go straight to News Talk ZB for a call-in. I'm not saying the host, but a caller will phone in, they banned all the guns, and this is what happens in the echo chamber of politics. A politician will give a headline answer that is either an exaggeration or a direct lie. Their supporters pick it up. It then becomes the headline, and then all of a sudden, you've got a story out of one person's bullshit picked up by 4 talkback callers or opinion piece writers about banning, quote, all the guns.
Here's the other part of that pisses me off too. That they always come back to this, that the gangs get away with it. Gang members aren't allowed guns. But unlicensed gang members having guns was always illegal. That is not a new thing. That has always been the case. And if the police come in and they find them with weapons, they are breaking the law. Nothing has changed there. I don't get this talking point that they think somehow that the gangs are allowed to have guns. They're not.
Yep. All right. There's a bit more of this intense, intelligent academic conversation around gun violence.
What this government has sown, the idea that gangs are our friends was their mantra when they were elected.
Said that twice. Just now pick up on this. See, one of the things you got to remember is what politicians, and we're talking about the squashed middle or the squeezed middle every time National speaks. So gangs are our friends. Said it twice in this interview. Mark my words, jot the time down, 26th of May, 10:22 p.m. He said it twice in this conversation. I guarantee you will hear that over the next 6 weeks from ACT. Mm-hmm. Gangs are our friends. You heard it here first. Keep an eye out for it.
Elected Labor government, and now people are suffering by feeling they can't go out on the street.
So what's the fix? What would you do?
Look, you've got to get tough on gangs, and the way you do that is you say, first of all, if you're a gang member dealing illegal drugs with illegal firearms, it's open season on your assets. Basically put up their tax rate. They put up tax on smoking. They seem to be putting up tax on working, saving and investing. Let's put up the tax on gangs.
So the solution is tax the gangs. And on one level, I kind of go, oh, good on you, ACT. You finally found someone that you'd raise taxes on rather than lowering it for everyone in the country. But it's ironic that it's the gangs you want to raise taxes on, the typically brown people of New Zealand and the people who make up that community. And it's just, I fell off my chair when I heard this. David Seymour's solution for gun violence in Auckland that's becoming like Los Angeles is let's tax them. Let's tax them. Let's tax the gangs, and that'll solve all the problems. We're not finished. A little bit more for this.
This would be a good start. Then we bring in gang injunction orders or gang control orders. They've worked in the UK. They're a good behaviour contract for people getting into the gang lifestyle that we want to come off it. And then you start doing things like, why do we pay schools based on enrolment rather than attendance? We need a laser focus on getting kids to actually attend schools. Unfortunately, the government's been focused on every fantasy in the book except for basic things based on basic values that keep people safe.
I'm going to play you one little bit because this is my favourite part of the interview. This is where he actually almost accuses Bernardine Oliver Kirby of potentially being a criminal. I'll stop it there after I've done this bit, but this is the greatest bit where he kind of goes, as far as I know, you're not.
Is this going to make a dent? I mean, taxing gangs, you say taxing gangs, that seems like it's an irony in itself.
Well,
Does it
give
not?
them a taste of their own medicine, but frankly...
You got to hang on. A taste of their own medicine, because we all know the gangs go around increasing tax rates and they up the PAYE on people.
You know, at the moment, they pay no tax, $500 million worth of P, $50 million of civil asset forfeiture. That's a 10% tax rate. Even the AG Party's not offering you a 10% tax rate, and you follow the law as far as I know.
Oh, it's my favourite bit. As far as I know, but you might not. You might be a criminal, but as far as I know, you follow the law. Jump in, Stu.
It's my favourite. Oh.
Either of you. Sorry, I didn't mean that.
Oh, again, this is something that they had a chance to make an impact on if they wanted to get tough on gangs. We had a referendum that could have taken control out of one of their revenue streams, and Act the National stood against it.
Are you talking cannabis?
Cannabis.
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. 100%.
You know, they talk about P, but I tell you what, people don't jump in on P and go, yeah, that's a good time. It's mainly weed. And it's gangs that had the resources to sell it, and I guarantee you that might not be their big earner, but it may be their main earner. And they could have taken that out of the pockets of the gangs.
Well, not only taken out of the pockets of the gang, but also then driven some tax back into the coffers of the government
100%.
by regulating.
Win. You know, look, one thing about me is I grew up in the 80s in a family on the periphery of a gang. My dad wasn't a patch gang member, but he was definitely around, and I knew of a lot of patch gang members. These guys have a fundamental lack of understanding about what draws people into the gangs.
We're going to get onto that in a sec, bro. We'll just hold that thought.
Hold
that thought, because we're going to go right exactly there. George, you were going to jump in as well. Do you want to add anything before we move?
No, I was going to say exactly what Chewie said, that it was good. It's good to hear that David Seymour's for some sort of Portugal model of legalizing drugs so they can be taxed.
All right, so let's play this last little bit. It's only literally 10 seconds, because he does say something of value, although I think he says it for a bit of the wrong reason. Here we go.
Now, you know, we got to start thinking practically. How do you take away the incentives so that no young person's best prospect is becoming a gang prospect?
So here's the thing. If you're going to ask that question, Mr. Seymour, you need to go and find the fucking answer to that, Mr. Seymour. And so, for example, some of these people that you hate so much about, you know, them being friends with politicians might be some of the people you want to speak to. Here is the ex-mongrel mob chief, Willie McGregor, on why people join gangs. Mr. Seymour's just said it. We've got to take away the incentives. We've got to figure out why kids are joining gangs. Quote, he told News Talk ZB's Mike Hosking he joined a gang to hang out with his mates and colleagues, had nothing to do with organised crime. We all worked together in the same freezing works. We all played in the same rugby teams. We partied together. We were the epitome of what you'd call a brotherhood. McGregor, who was once the president of the Mongrel Mob chapter, is now involved in turning young people away from gang life. So I'm sure this is where you can pick it up and go on with your story, Chewie, but I would just challenge anybody who says we have to figure out why, and then not go back to, because if we tax them, I'm sure that 9-year-old in whatever suburb in the country you want to list won't go towards gangs because they're being taxed more now. Chewie.
Yeah. Look, it's one of the things, and the quote that you've just read out that pretty much nails it. These people are outlaws. They have already checked out of society. So David Seymour being cross with him is going to do fuck all. You know, and they fall into these groups because of a lack of opportunity, lack of family, lack of community, and they find all of those things there. There's probably not a lot of gang members that'll harp on about community, but they'll certainly talk about brotherhood. And they form their own society because of that. Us shutting the door on them, they'll see absolutely no benefit coming in. You involve them in a process. They're not going to become model citizens overnight, but you've got to give them a pathway.
Well, you can actually tie that back into something else he said about attendance at school as well. Mm-hmm. Like the kid that has bad attendance at school because maybe there's troubles at home, he can't find like his identity within his family, he can't find it within his schoolmates. He gravitates to a position where he can find his identity. He gravitates to it, honestly, where he finds brotherhood or whānau or family or whatever you want to say, and that's often a gang. So actually, if you're going to have that kind of conversation around how do we turn people away from gangs, it's a systemic, you know, society-wide issue. It's not let's tax them. It's why is there even a need for that kid who can't find it at home and can't find it at school, who gravitates towards it? And then there's, because he's done it and now he's 30 with kids, his kids are just born into it. So it's not about, there's not a solution that can be legislated on at next year's election and then it's all over. It's a much bigger issue than that. And I really, I was going to say, I hope the politicians get real. They're not going to. I hope other media outlets, and I'll put us up there, I'm happy to say that, we have these conversations. I hope others start to have them with all reality too. I love Bernadine Oliver Kirby. I never worked with her, but I worked around her when I was at ZB. And just the idea of sitting there and letting him say all that bullshit frustrates the crap out of me. When we had David Seymour on, we told him why people thought he was racist. You know, which is really simple, Mr. Seymour. I'll say it again. It's because it's not that you're looking for equality amongst races. It's that you're only looking for equality amongst races. Any other equality you don't care about, but you want to see equalness when it comes to race. You don't care about other protected classes under the Human Rights Act. You don't care about finding equalness when it comes to disability or age or gender. You don't care about any of those because they're okay to have special rules for those classes. But when it comes to race, you want equality. And because you only ever talk about wanting equality in race, people think you're racist. That's the answer. And that's what we put in front of Mr. Seymour. He may never come on again. That's fine. But I'm not going to sit here with someone sitting across from us and go, oh, you're taxing. Oh, yeah, that's good. It's not going to happen. And it's not doing the public a service either.
Yeah. You know, there are people out there in the community that 100% know what the solution is to gangs. And it is getting in early, and it is making sure that these families are supported and that they don't have to rely on the guns to, the gangs to make sure the kids are fed and their rent's paid and all of that sort of thing. It's giving them other options. And it's not a sexy soundbite, and it's not something that's going to make you seem tough on crime, but it is the solution. And there's social workers and there's public servants out there that know this for a fact from decades of research and actual on the ground work. And then David Seymour swoops in and his twerking shorts and goes, oh, we need to tax them and we need to take the guns off them. And sure, if you reckon that's the answer, you go and do it, mate.
Seymour's answer to all problems is, let's say, fair free markets. We need to capitalism harder.
Yeah.
Kim says, how many more ways can you punish poor people? Empress says, typical conservative politician, lie to create fear. It's a very good point. Of course, knowing David's concerns, he was referring to how Auckland has climate change related water shortages, increased wealth inequity. Yeah. And then there's it's Carl again, actually, but we can do it. This is all bad faith. They are trying to create sound bites for their base, exactly, who eat up anything they say uncritically. And this is, I guess, and I'm not suggesting that Bernadine did anything wrong, because this is a societal-wide problem within the media. Fucking follow up your questions. If you hear something ridiculous like tax the gangs, I just want to see that on a T-shirt. Vote, act, tax the gangs.
How do you tax
follow
them?
it up?
Are they talking about more raids?
No, they're talking about taking their assets off them. Basically, what he said was, if they make $500 million on P and we seize $50 million of assets off them, it's like a 10% tax. But it's not how tax works. But
so that's something that the police have. The police and the courts have the ability to do that. The proceeds of crime.
Yeah,
they had that legislation already.
Yeah.
So what the fuck is he talking about?
Yeah.
Every time they do a big raid on the headhunters or the Camachos or that sort of thing, you see them taking away cars and bikes and properties and cash and all of that. We already do that.
And look, let me say it again, George. We'll bring that video in that you found for us. I saw some headlines about Luxon talking about gangs, but I haven't looked at it, so I'm happy to have a look. And I'll say it again. The reason that people consider, I'm not actually saying is, but consider Mr. Seymour's views and policies to be racist is that's all he focuses on. I do find it more than ironic that he once again, like, actors about lower taxes, lower taxes, lower taxes, lower taxes. And the one time he talks about raising taxes on someone, it's a group predominantly made up of brown people. I just, I'm sorry if I'm making one stretch too far, that's fine, but I can't get past that as a dog whistle to his base. George, yours.
Yeah, it's funny how for the libertarians or just generally the people right wing on economics, they will still love to, in America, give the military the biggest budget in the world to, kill brown people around the world on a daily basis.
It's almost like they just change their policies to suit their mind. It's almost like that. It's almost like they decide we're going to do it this way for us, and you guys can not have it your way. It's almost like they're disingenuous, almost, maybe.
How quick a nominally libertarian party turns into an authoritarian one.
Yeah.
Like it plays against what they profess that they are. A libertarian party would want, less prohibition on drugs, but
sure.
that wouldn't play well with their true base of authoritarians that just want to see gangs cracked down on.
Yeah. George, you got something for us as well?
Yeah, this was. I thought I'd save this for us rather than watching it because it just started to infuriate me. So this is Luxon on the AM show talking about law and order stuff, and the AM show happy to oblige with how the National Party seems to be running their marketing.
Let me guess. No significant follow-up questions? Just wondering.
And welcome back to AM this morning. Great to have you watching. It is 17 minutes after 6. We've heard about multiple shootings across Auckland overnight last night. Take a look at this map. It gives you a really good idea of where the latest that we've heard about has been happening. Suspected turf war between the killer bees and the tribesman gangs. You can see there Te Atatu, Otara, Papatoetoi, Flatbush and Papakura all at this point, we understand scenes where shots have been fired. We've got our reporters on this morning. We will hear from police, hopefully later on in the program, 18 minutes after.
Just pause it for a sec. Sam C to this motherfucker. No one suggesting that's okay either. Just quietly. No one suggesting it. But what our politicians are supposed to do, not to sort of oversimplify it, is they're our representatives to start moving to solutions. The Mr. Seymour example, a solution towards how do we keep kids out of gangs, is a systemic and societal wide issue starting at birth. It's not tax them. So he's identifying the issue but giving no solutions. Which I wonder if this is going to go on, this theme in this clip you've got for us, George.
Yeah, as we see, National and Act's way of solving these issues is quite often getting involved in whatever turf war is going on and becoming another gang in that turf war.
I would pay money for that.
And I mean, we'll see that later on in the show when we turn to the US and how those conversations around shootings in schools often become just a matter of military strategy and enforcement.
Good morning.
Morning, good to be with you.
Terrible news to wake up to.
Yeah, it is, and it's been happening too often, hasn't it? Every day there's something like this going on with gangs, and the reality is that gangs have increased by 40% under this government. We have just over 8,000 gang members. We just have over 10,000 police officers. We've had 2,500 501s return, 50% have reoffended, and they're certainly contributing to the problem. But I think there's a number of things that the government needs to be doing, in order to cut down on it. And
okay, what are these things? Because you say they're soft on crime, so where is the softness?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I would have taken the $210 million that we're spending on a firearms register for legal gun owners, and I would have redirected it into firearm prohibitions orders so that you have police with warrantless search powers so they can actually go into gang pads and go after illegal guns.
Okay.
Our problem here is illegal guns, right?
Yep.
Can we pause for a sec?
That sounds like great freedom, eh?
Can we pause? Look, here's something, because this is what I do, right? I hear a fact and I go, really? Let's check it out. He talked about gang numbers going up by 40%. Now, yes, there is a report that says gang affiliations around the country seem to be growing at a fast rate, with more than 8,000 gang members now officially recorded in New Zealand. That is almost double the figure recorded by authorities 5 years ago, when there were 4,420 people recorded as gang members on a national gang list. That doesn't mean numbers have doubled. That means we've identified more. Mr. Luxon just said the numbers have increased by 40%. No, it doesn't. It means that 40% more have been identified. The numbers might be exactly the same. They might have only identified 30% of them 5 years ago. Now, I'm also not saying that he's wrong, but you can't make that claim to be an absolute when all that the research appears, now I'm just looking at an article, appears to say is that 4,000 odd people were recorded and now 8,000 gang members have been officially recorded. Perhaps the group doing this officially recording is building the numbers, because you do 1,000 this month and 1,000 that much, and of course it's going to grow. So I'm not trying to defend. I'm not trying to say he's completely wrong, but I'm saying you can't make that as an absolute statement that he just did. That's what I'm trying to say.
Second thing I'd do is have a dedicated gang unit. So anytime there is a gang infringement, whether it's a parking fine, whether it's a speeding fine, whether it's a building consent at a gang pad, you'd have the gang unit deal with it.
That's one of the things the police have said.
Because gangs apply for so many building consents, don't they?
Yeah. They're going to get on their backs and not let go.
Yeah, I'd really want to have that as a permanent, strong gang unit feature.
Would you have an armed response team? Would you have the Strike Force Raptor?
Well, that's kind of what we're talking about. We went to the election last time.
Isn't that called the Isn't that called the Armed Defenders Squad? Don't we have that already?
Exactly. We have an anti-gang task force. It is called
this one will
the
be
police.
A special gang one.
A special gang one. Different colours on their shoulders.
It wasn't that long ago we were talking about police shootings, and that's without having a dedicated, always armed, roaming around looking for a job to do special unit in Auckland that I guarantee you will not be cruising the North Shore.
Well, exactly. Like I was talking before about the turf war and how often their solution is to just, let's just join the war. That will make that will solve the problem.
We're going to move on in a bit just because we've got some other things to get to as well. But I'm interested if Lux and if you guys know, because you guys are both saying this, I haven't. I mean, is this going to cost us another $100 million for this gang setup? Are they going to be happily, giving tax cuts and then adding a lot more to the budget for these new gang enforcements all around the country? Do we know anything about that?
Yeah, he said he'd take the $200 million from, sorry, I can't remember what it was.
From the gun registry.
Right.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I would have taken the $210 million that we're spending on firearms register for legal gun owners, and I would have redirected it into firearm prohibitions orders so that you have police with warrantless search powers, so they can actually go into gang pads and go after illegal guns.
Warrantless search powers.
I love how he says that like that's a good thing. Warrantless search powers.
It also goes back to the point that I made before, is that illegal guns start out as legal guns.
Yeah.
They are stolen or they are sold by people who stolen from or sold by people who legally bought these guns, people with good reputations that are selling them on a black market. If they're on a register, that becomes much, much harder to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Kim makes a very good point as well. Next solution will be stop and frisk. Yeah. All right. Hey, we're going to move on because there's other things to get to. But can I just say as well, if people are watching right now, could you mention in the comments on whatever you're watching what you think about the 10 o'clock time slot we've been doing? Because I've been thinking about this, George, we haven't talked about this yet, but I was thinking about, do we change it up again next week? Do we make it 9 p.m.? Do we go back to the daytime stuff? These stories we're doing now with the AM show, for example, in the morning thing, we would have done it midday had we been doing the midday show. So if you're watching right now, I wouldn't mind hearing what you think about these as sort of late evening conversations as opposed to daytime conversations. So, right, speaking of important conversations, let us talk about, are you Team Amber or Team Johnny, Chewy? Do you have an opinion on that?
I think that they're probably both pretty shitty people.
I think it's fair.
And look, I don't follow celebrities. There is no reason for this to bubble up in my social media feeds that are in front of me. Somehow it has. And I saw a very interesting story earlier in the week that Mr. Shapiro may be responsible for that. Pumping a whole lot of money in promoting an anti-Amber Heard narrative as it pushed back against the Me Too movement. And I'm like, holy shit. I don't know if you've seen that story. I'll pop it over in the wee chat thing there. But yeah, he's pumped $50,000 US into Facebook and Instagram ads promoting short clips against Amber Heard. Why would he do that?
Yeah, interesting. So this is a conversation. The guy on the left there with the blonde hair formerly was one of the main guys at TMZ or TMZ, would bring he like would get the videos and tips sent to him. Yeah. So he was someone that would be receiving information, receiving tips, and also he was someone who kind of sent out the paparazzi to take photos and stuff. So it was kind of a hub between sort of management and the journalists, TMZ. And so he received we've probably all seen it, I probably should have queued it up, but the video with Johnny Depp jumping around, slamming doors, obviously drunk, recorded by Amber Heard. We know Amber Heard recorded it because it's her phone, and you know, and in the setting of the courtroom, she's claimed over and over again she has no idea how that video got from her phone to TMZ, right? And this guy is brought on, and he has no idea where the tip came from. But I just wanted to play this as a really interesting sort of commentary on how the courtroom works when they're trying to get to an answer without saying an answer. So there's a conversation between this guy from TMZ, used to be TMZ, and Johnny Depp's lawyer about how TMZ gets copyright for a video that they are then going to brand as their own. Have a listen.
How long does it take to post a story after media's been received by TMZ?
After media's been received, it could take any length of time depending on who owns the copyright.
How does TMZ obtain copyright over images and videos?
The only way to obtain copyright over media would be if we shot it ourselves, if it was sent to the tip line, source verified that it was from the original copyright owner, and then either purchased from that person or given to us. And then the third option would be if it was directly given to us by the copyright holder, like a direct source.
And how long does it take to copyright something TMZ has received through the tip line?
It can take a while because you have to extensively verify that that person owns the copyright. And then possibly, it depends also if you can even get in contact with the person because they might not be super responsive immediately via phone or email that they provided. And then potentially you'd have to enter a negotiation with our Clips and Clearances Department to figure out the cost of that media.
How long does it take for TMZ to obtain a copyright over something received directly from a source?
Something in the realm of 15 minutes just to do what I described before, which is putting bumpers and a bug on something and write the article and post it. It's pretty fast.
How much time had passed from the time you received the kitchen cabinet video to the time it was posted on TMZ?
About 15 minutes.
There you go. So without saying it, they're saying it. They're saying that was sent to them by Amber Heard because it only took 15 minutes to receive and go up. And actually, this is not even a commentary on I think she's wrong and he's right, but I just found it an interesting way that a courtroom can get to an answer that they're looking for without having to say, because he couldn't say who sent it to him, but they can go through that deductive lining and questioning to get to the answer of, we can get it up within 15 minutes once we've got copyright. How do you get copyright? Well, the owner of the video can give it to us. How long did the video go up after you received it? 15 minutes. And we know it belonged to Amber Heard because she filmed it. Interesting little observation in the courtroom today. And I have to say, although it's not something that I've been keeping close an eye on, it's been popping up in my feed as well. And that channel, that Law and Crime channel, is getting something like 300 million views a day at the moment. So it's certainly working for them as well.
Yeah, it seems to be that you've got the Ben Shapiro example that Chewy said, but also just the people who do all the sort of pop drama and that sort of thing. There's definitely we can imagine why Ben Shapiro and others are tagging along with it, because it's part of their larger sort of culture war against Me Too, and it's part of that whole thing. I have noticed as well, quite often it will be people that aren't necessarily in that world, but maybe do videos about dating or even pickup artists and that sort of thing. But yeah, just my personal view on it as well is it's having been myself in pretty messy relationships and been around them my whole life. It's pretty easy to pick up on the idea that both of them probably had pretty good goes at each other, and that that's how it often works, is that if we want to talk about responsibility, or just in terms of like partaking, I guess, in the toxicity, it definitely is not always as one-sided as a courtroom might see it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's wrap up the show with a conversation around the Uvalde shooting. And I wanted to touch base on this for a few things. One is, I guess, a bit of an update because we did this yesterday evening with a couple of academics, and to follow through what's happened in the last 24 hours and where we're at right now. I was shocked. But I should, when we use words and they lose their meaning, like when we're talking about how horrific this event is, for me to say shocked now would imply that what I'm about to say is really bad, but we're talking about 19 murdered children. So I'll just say it surprised me that the original reports came out that this 18-year-old gunman had a pistol and maybe a rifle. But one of the things that was very surprising today, and it's one of the issues that those who are supporters of guns in the NRA in America are now having to deal with, and that is this 18-year-old, the day he turned 18, went and bought assault weapons legally. Oh. It's what he wanted more than anything. Have a listen to this.
Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez says the shooter, quote, had no problem legally purchasing the assault-style rifles used in the massacre.
He went to high school here in Uvalde, and unfortunately, on his 18th birthday, he bought those two assault rifles that you've been talking about. And they are assault rifles. It's the first thing he did when he turned 18.
And then later on in the report, they kind of echo that. So there's a couple of things. That was the first thing he did. So he got up when he turned 18. He got ready for the day. 8:30 in the morning. This is my little addition, but walked out the door. 9 o'clock, store open, jumped in there, bought two assault rifles legally. And then we have to start looking at things like what Greg Abbott's done with the gun laws in Texas and how he's made it easier to purchase weapons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just the end of this, I'm going to play a bit more of this. It's the reporter making the report, kind of wrapping up that whole story about how he purchased the guns.
Pain and passion on the floor there. Meanwhile, State Senator Gutierrez said the shooter purchased those rifles on his 18th birthday. He also said it was the first thing he did that day. Meanwhile, the parents of these 19 children are planning funerals instead of their summer vacation. They now have to find the perfect casket or urn to reflect the personality of the little life they loved and lost.
So there's a couple of items. Obviously, it's pretty emotional and horrible thing that we are hearing. But I was going to say, Chewy, me and George spent 40 minutes talking about this last night. I've got some more stuff to play, especially one of the things we're going to play is how the right in America is responding to this and some of the lunacy we're hearing there. But I'm happy just to throw it open to you, Chewy, because you haven't had a chance necessarily to publicly have a chat about this and share your views. Why don't you go ahead?
Look, one story I saw today doing the rounds on Twitter was about the police response to this. I don't know if you guys have seen it. That police turned up and formed a cordon and stayed basically by their cars outside the building for upwards of 40 minutes.
Wow, no, I hadn't
restraining and trying to stop the parents from going in and trying to do something because the police there weren't. Part of those stories that I've seen circulating around on Twitter focus on that particular town's police department. The fact that it swallows up a full 40% of their municipal expenditure goes on their police force. They're extraordinarily well armed and armored, as many police forces are in the States. And the narrative that we've always had around these shootings is that the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
So there was lots of good guys, yeah.
They were all there. They outnumbered the guy. They thought he was wearing body armor. Turns out he wasn't. They sat there and did nothing. Yet they've been quite happy to hold their hands out for funding for flak jackets and armored vehicles and military gear. Like some of these police departments over there, when they get tooled up, they look like they're going to take back Ramadi, you know, and that's their justification. Oh, we need it in case something happens. Well, something happens over there every day, you know. It keeps happening. Well, how big does the pile of dead children get? I've seen so many comments from American gun owners on Twitter that go, I like my guns. I'm a responsible gun owner, and I 100% agree that these weapons shouldn't be available or they should be harder to get. They say that 90% of Americans are behind this, but the money's too great. Their voice doesn't matter when you factor in the amount of money that gets spent by weapons companies and the NRA to keep their position and their lobby groups going and keep their profits going. You will never solve this problem in the US. You can't solve it.
We talked last night, Chewy, about 213 acts of gun violence, mass gun violence in America. Now, that doesn't mean 213 acts where someone always died, but 213 acts of gun violence in America the day of that shooting. That was 145 days into the year. What I was shocked with, and it might have actually been in that report, but I did play it, was they said already this year there's been 30 shootings at a K through 12 school. So America and New Zealand now, we're year 1 to 13. K is year 1. So in America, whatever is grade 4, we have it as year 5. So 30 events. So think about that, right? What are we in now? May, January, February, March, April, May. So we're, say at the end of this month, we're 5 months in. That's 20 weeks. 5 4s are 20. That's not including weekends. So that might be more like 100 days. And then there was Christmas and New Year's and that. So let's take off another 10. That might be 90 days. And then there's probably been Columbus Day. So you might be looking at 80 days of school. And in America, in say 80 to 90 days of school, there's been 30 shootings in the schools. So that doesn't sound as scary as 213 for the whole of America. But let's say in 80 days of school in 2022, there's been 30 shootings in a K through 12 school.
Yep. When Columbine happened, they had absolutely no problem cracking down on Marilyn Manson, trench coats, and weird kids.
Yeah.
You know? I saw that the Sandy Hook kids, had they survived, would be entering university now. Nothing changes over there. It doesn't matter whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. There's too much money in their political system. It is too compromised, and it does not matter whether the majority of the population sees the common sense in the fact that you don't need military-style weapons. You don't need fucking 50-round drum mags. You don't need to be able to buy military hardware on your 18th birthday. The other thing that I found really interesting, a study that was doing the rounds that says, do you know what the biggest common link to just spree shooters in the US? It's a hatred of women. Often their first targets are women.
Wow.
His first victim was his grandmother.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's angry people out there, and you know, at 18, I'm sure his teachers picked up on it. You know, I'm sure there's been little clues, but I mean, their system's so broken, and I'm talking about the entirety of their system. The education system didn't pick up on this kid being off. There wasn't a mental health system that they could refer him to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, the idea about not needing these weapons as well, we did a bit last night, Chewy, where I kind of said, and I tweeted about this as well, you know, if Elon Musk really wanted to make a change, why didn't he put his $45 billion towards getting guns off the streets? And I'm like, $1,000 a gun, that's 45 million guns off the streets. I saw a piece today, actually it might have been in we're about to play a bit from Seth Meyers' show, and it may have been in here, I'm not going to play it, but they talked about in California, they did a gun drive once for $50 petrol vouchers. And they ran out of $50 petrol vouchers in a couple of hours. And the people were saying things like, I don't think we should have these guns around. People were saying things like, I don't feel that I can lock it up securely enough. So I was like, $1,000 a gun, that'll get people $100 a gun with $45 million. That's 450 million guns, you know? And I'm not saying all the guns would go, but I'm like, Imagine the difference that something like that could actually do, rather than, well, I want to be able to speak freely on Twitter, so I'm going to do this. Actually make a difference with a change. I mean, now, I'm not being naive. No one's suggesting he's going to do it. But these people who speak up and they say, we want to make a difference, we want to bring freedom for America, even though I'm South African, they probably could actually affect a change in an area like that with that money doing something else.
Yeah, but they won't do it. None of these guys would. Like, him and Bezos have enough money to house every homeless people, feed every hungry person, and do something like get these guns off the street. We saw the same arguments here with our gun buyback program. Why would anyone take such a small amount for their gun? You know, these aren't even the bad people. But it's about removing. If you remove a great number of something, then its availability is lower. You know, you have less guns on the street for crime. Yeah. You know, you make it harder for a kid to roll into a gun shop and walk out with an AR-15 on the same fucking day.
Well, I mean, the thing about it is, like, and I'm using a silly example, but that's how we can show the extremes. If there were zero guns in a community, there can, by definition, be zero gun crime, right? If there are 300 to 400 million guns in a community, the chances of gun crime goes up. I guess what there should be is trying to find what is a reasonable and happy middle ground, if nothing else. I also wanted to play a bit. This is from Seth Meyers' comedy show, right? But I'm playing it because he did a compilation of, well, not him, but in his show, there was a compilation of what's being said at the moment by right-wingers about this solution. So think about this, right? Adults out there, parents out there, uncles and aunts out there. Your kids at I spoke to a comedian contact of mine in America today who lives in New York. I won't say who it is, it doesn't matter. But I said, do you want to come on tonight to give us a bit of a vibe? You know, you've got a kid in school. And I won't say who it is, but I'll read his response because we were chatting. Hang on, I'll read it to you. Give me a second. And he said this to me. He said, too angry and upset to talk about it. Sorry, Pat. I wouldn't be able to be even remotely professional about it. To which I kind of said, well, you don't know our product because we're never professional. But the point being, that's the vibe of a New Zealander in a completely different part of the country about what's happening in schools. So I'll go again. You imagine you're a parent and you've just had a tragedy at a school, again, involving guns and little people. Yep. These are the solutions that the right wing is offering at the moment. Have a listen to this.
Effective tool for keeping kids safe is armed law enforcement on the campus. People, retired military, retired law enforcement, outside the perimeter of every school in the country. They can donate their time. We can offer them tax breaks, no income tax in the state, no income tax federally, 10 hours a week, and we could have every school in America covered.
We have to harden these targets so no one can get in ever except through one entrance.
What we need to do is utilize smart technology. That's what's needed. We need to install man traps. This is something we've discussed in the past. Back in 2018, I checked. Man traps, a series of interlocking doors at the school entrance that are triggered by a tripwire.
We can't stop bad people from doing bad things. They're going to violate murder laws. They're not going to follow gun laws. I've never understood that argument. But we can't harden these schools. We can create points of access that are difficult to get through. We can potentially arm and prepare and train teachers and other administrators to respond quickly.
Now, bear with me. I can feel you wanting to jump in, Shuey, but just let me get this bit finished. All right, let me get this bit finished. For people who don't know what that guy was talking about with man traps, sounds like something that you might find in a cougar doing in a central New Zealand town suburb. This is a man trap. This is a genuine suggestion from these people about what should be in all the schools.
Okay, here's an example of a man trap. Employee enters space, dynamic scan is performed.
Every child scanned.
Person only is confirmed, access control is granted.
Now, hang on, I just saw this for the first time.
It's like a prison.
But these same right-wingers are the ones that don't want any kind of registry and don't keep a track of my movements and don't do anything. Freedom, America freedom, but now they want kids to have to scan in one at a time to a school. Have a look at this.
The door opens. Second employee asks to enter and is denied access by the interlocking door feature. Now second employee can enter and they run their card to the access control. TDARs will only allow one person in that space at one time.
Now, before
Again, that's going to be the only point of entrance as well.
So here's the thing, right? That the group of videos we just watched, right? This is my last bit, Chewy, before you explode. This is what that group, that's what that video montage, this is what they suggested to keep schools safe, right? They suggested armed law enforcement on campus. They suggested, we just wrote this from the video, volunteered retired military, retired law enforcement outside the perimeter of every school in the country. They suggested harden these targets. Now, what that means is let's fortify the school and make them harder to get into and out of, right? One entrance. So imagine one entrance and there's a fire in the school, just quietly. They said smart technology is needed. Install man traps, a series of interlocking doors that are triggered by a tripwire. They said we can harden these schools, create points of access that are difficult to get through, and we can arm and train teachers and administrators. Yeah, you know, I used to work in schools, and the receptionist was always the person you wanted to make the most friends with because she had all the power. But now she's got all the power and a fucking Glock so that she can respond quickly. So, Chewy, you've already said it. That is the list for a prison. So these right-wingers are coming out saying the way we protect our kids is we put them into a prison. They don't go, actually, how do we solve the issue with the guns? They go, we're not going to do that. They're going to say we can't do that. I'm going to say we're not going to do that. So what we're going to do is basically put every child in a virtual flak jacket and helmet for when the guns come in next time.
You can already buy Kevlar-lined backpacks because that's the dystopia that they live in. I love the Texas Attorney General saying that there's no point in changing gun laws because the bad guys won't follow them. What a fantastic argument for laws in general from the Attorney General. There's no point in laws because people who break laws are going to break them anyway.
Yeah,
like, just the insanity, the brain worms of these people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because there's always going to be evil, so what's the point?
Just throw up your arms. You know? How high does the mountain of children's bodies get before they fucking get over themselves?
And once again, we see this militarization of the language, right? That we're in Afghanistan fighting a counterinsurgency because that worked so well as well, right?
Oh, let's get retired military in. That's great. That's considering awesome. The amount of PTSD and mental health issues that they have because they bring back their soldiers and don't deprogram them.
That or their higher Blackwater.
All of these mental ideas that are expensive, unproven, and just I just don't get it. Just like if you want a gun, go and get your license, register it, amend the Second Amendment, or just realize what it's actually there for.
That's why it's called an amendment. So because it can be changed.
You've already changed it once.
Yeah.
Yeah, the King of England is not coming back to you. If he does, your AR-15 is not going to stop him.
And let me say this as well. To be fair, right, although I believe that the right in America is the biggest problem, the left have plenty to be responsible for them as well. Joe Manchin came out today, who was the swing vote in a lot of this legislation, and he said he would do, quote, anything to save lives of children, anything. So he was asked, would he now bring the vote forward to abolish the filibuster? No. No, even though the filibuster is one of the things, and for people who don't know what that is, it means if you speak for, like if you're having a vote, it has to be done by midnight tonight, for example. But a filibuster is when someone, a politician, a senator, can get up and keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. We saw, what's his name, old Werewolf Cruz, reading out Green Eggs and Ham as a filibuster. So in other words, they run out of time to bring the vote, and it's a way that they can stop votes coming. Now, Manchin will do anything to help, except he refuses to allow the filibuster to be changed.
Yeah, and history proves why, it's so sort of, I feel so hopeless when we look at maybe the midterms and we're like, oh, yeah, there's a few Democrats that, they might get the Congress a little bit there. But we've seen it before. We've seen these majorities and we've seen them have this political capital and just not spend it, right? usually because of the money in politics that Chewy's brought up earlier in the show.
Hey, I would like to throw one more thing in. I didn't prep this, so it might be a little bit out of cue, but this is also quite new. There's a history of guns in America. There's a history of, NRA in America. But there was a clip played on that show that we've already done a clip from, where a presiding Supreme Court judge, Republican, was talking about the Second Amendment and how dangerous it is. I think it's from 1991. Have a listen to what he said then.
If I were writing the Bill of Rights now, there wouldn't be any such thing as the Second Amendment.
Which says?
That a well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of the state, that people's rights to bear arms. This has been the subject of one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have ever seen in my lifetime. Now just look at those words. There are only 3 lines to that amendment. A well-regulated militia. If the militia, which was going to be the state army, was going to be well-regulated, why shouldn't 16 and 17 and 18 or any other age persons be regulated in the use of arms?
There you go. So that was a position of a justice in 1991 who was also a Republican.
Yep. And that's absolutely it. We obviously hear from those guys that it's the right to bear arms. It's only half of it. It was about the state being able to raise its own army to defend itself on a state-by-state basis. Essentially, they have something like that that's, the National Guard or whatever. It is not carte blanche for everybody to go buy anti-aircraft guns and, 150-round drum mags for home defense.
Well, and it's sort of, not that it's more than what you've just said, but just to expand on what you've said, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state and the right of people to keep and bear arms should not be infringed. So there is conditions around it, right? Being necessary for the security of a free state, a well-regulated militia. There's nothing in there about protecting your TV. There's nothing in there about defending your property. The Second Amendment isn't about
defense of the state.
Correct. The Second Amendment's not about stand your ground laws. It actually is completely. So when people cite the Second Amendment, the only reason, and I don't know why we know this, maybe we know this because we're choosing not to be ignorant to it, whereas others choose to be ignorant. The Second Amendment talks about the right to form a militia. That's the right. That's why you've got the right to bear arms, not for any other reason. Not to carjack someone, not to commit crimes, not to do things that are now lawful, not to go shooting at the range, not even to hunt deer. Right? I mean, most countries hunt, but actually the Second Amendment doesn't say being a well-regulated human being being necessary to hunt deer. That's not what the Second Amendment says. That's not actually the right that the Second Amendment covers, but I'll just call it willful ignorance.
It's there to basically write in the right to political revolution into the Constitution as a check and balance on the sovereign, right? And just in case you get a tyrant in charge, it's meant to give the right to the people, in the ideal sort of John Locke way to rise up. I mean, they were thinking of a bit of a different country back then, though.
Dude,
as well.
Yeah, but then when they do get a fucking tyrant in charge, they listen to him and then they storm the Capitol. So the one time they get a tyrant that potentially, I'm not saying is worthy of uprising against them, but when they get an actual tyrant, they follow him and storm the Capitol.
I remember seeing a gun control ad from a few years back. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a guy that does walks into his former workplace to do a shooting, and he comes in with an 18th century musket, because that's what they were talking about at the time. So he walks into the office, he loads this fucking thing, points it at someone, big cloud of smoke, hits nothing, everybody runs, and he just angrily sort of loads a second shot and everything's gone. It's just because it's in their constitution doesn't mean that it can't be changed or that it's still fit for purpose. They've moved, what do they call them? These constitutional absolutists. They're holding up the people that wrote the US Constitution as, literal gods that have set this path that cannot be deviated from. They wrote that with some really forward-thinking ideas, and one of them was, we can change this. as we need
and they
to.
have. And the other thing is, even those who are like ardent Second Amendment supporters, even they agree you're not allowed to own a bazooka. Hang on, what? Why not? So there is already regulation. I had this conversation with someone else today about a different topic, and it's like when people say there's something, they're actually not always that thing, because like if you say I've got the right to bear arms, well, I'm like, well, how's a bazooka? Well, no, you can't have a bazooka. Okay, so you have a line already that you say no beyond that line. My line's here. How about we just how about I give you, how about you give me 40% and I'll give you 60%, and we'll find a different line that we both compromise on. And
see, my YouTube playlist is absolutely full of gun videos. I enjoy watching them. I like the mechanics of them. I like target shooting. I like history, and that's all part of it. But yeah, I get really uncomfortable when someone takes a position of I should be able to go out and buy whatever I want. It's like, well, no, because I mean, surely you must be able to look around your own community. And I certainly know for a fact that the people that I know that are gun enthusiasts for hunting or collecting or whatever can definitely go, oh, yeah, no, there's someone that I know that absolutely shouldn't own guns or shouldn't own a certain type of gun or that sort of thing. And I guarantee you it will be the same in the States.
Yeah,
that there are people that go, that guy that I see down at the range every now and then, he probably shouldn't have a gun. And I'm certainly not casting a big swatch that everybody that owns a gun in the US is insane. A lot of them are sitting there going, it's common sense that we need to do something. But their voices will never outweigh the amount of money that is going into their legislature's pockets.
Well, except as we talked about last night, although it's not the coverall, when 91% of the population of America wants something, it's actually not courageous for a politician to bring in background checks.
No.
Because it's what's courageous is to do things that people don't like, but it's the right thing to do. This is a policy that people do like, and it's still the right thing to do. So, and look, let's make it clear, because all we've heard about for the past 36 hours is background checks. As Mukhtar said last night, and we echoed, background checks ain't going to do jack shit overall, but you got to have some low-hanging fruit, and you got to actually, because, this kid might have had a background check and maybe he didn't get it on his 18th birthday, but he got it 2 days later. So what I'm saying is it's not the answer. Background checks are not the answer, but to have such immovability in any kind of negotiation needs to start somewhere. So I see that background check thing as just a way to step in a direction of compromise.
Yep. A background check on this kid wouldn't have stopped it. Like
I'm assuming not.
No, because how do you background check an 18-year-old that hasn't done anything?
Yeah, true.
It's one of those things. It's there isn't one thing that's going to solve this for America. It is background checks. It's limited magazine size. It's restricting the type of weapons. It's owner's licensing. It's graduated licensing. There's a whole range of things that they could bring in. All of them will be fought tooth and nail. All of them, their media will be flooded with attack ads and fear mongering and some of the most disgusting things you could possibly imagine. Their whole system is broken.
Well,
it's the fall of the Roman Empire part 2. It's I don't know how you solve a problem like America.
Well, what the Democrats need to do here is bring the vote to the floor every single week and make the Republicans block it or stand up and say no. They need to do the same for Roe versus Wade as well. They need to bring Roe versus Wade before the vote every single week to codify it and make the Republicans own these things. Because at the moment, we looked at it last night, the background check idea has been around since 2013. You can't blame the Republicans alone for not passing this since 2013. The Roe versus Wade could have been codified any time since 1973, and they haven't done it. So if you don't want to own this, Democrats, it's time to, and they talked about this for Medicare for All, it's time to force the vote as much as you can and make the Republicans stand up and say no every single time. That's what they need to do. George, anything from you, son?
You got to match the energy.
Yeah.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. All right. Hey, well, I'm not going to put them up on screen, but looking at the bunch of comments that came in, there's a series of them. And actually, nice to hear from people who have been with us both during the day and in the evenings. There are people there who we've seen, like both at 11 in the morning and midday that we did, and 10 at night. There's a pretty overwhelming consensus from these people at the moment that evenings is better for them. Something to know. Doesn't mean anything, guys. This is not a fucking democracy. Let me tell you that straight away. We're still playing with it. We're still tootling around and seeing what's going to work. I quite like the evenings. I quite like the vibe and hanging out and chatting a bit more. It does become problematic if we want to try and get guests and that kind of thing on board. Obviously, people find it easier to join us at midday than at midnight. But it's a sliding scale. We're still doing. Maybe we will do a different time next week, but maybe we'll keep it in the evenings and I don't know, bring it to 9 p.m. just to see, have a feel what it's like at that or something. But stay with us, and if you follow us on, I'm sure Chewy doesn't mind if we just block his face a little bit. I'm sure that there you go. If you follow us on the YouTube channel in particular, then you will get notified when we're going to be live. And we normally try and do a notification at least an hour before we're live. So if we do change to 9 o'clock next week, follow us on YouTube, go and subscribe to that channel. Or the other thing is you can follow.
Smash that bell.
Smash that bell.
You got to smash that bell.
You gotta. What do? You gotta click the like and smash that bell. My kids keep telling me what we're supposed to be saying.
Share, comment,
like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe, smash that bell. That's why we're never going to be successful at this, because we don't have the patter down.
I'm down with the kids.
So that's a good way to. Also, you can follow me. Sorry to do my own advert, guys. On Twitter as well. That's a place that we put all the clips and stuff on there as well. And anytime there's someone on with us, like Chewy, then you'll get his Twitter by following me on Twitter as well. So it's an easy way to do it. Okay, are you going to come back tomorrow night, Chewy? What are you going to do? It's up to you, brother. Do you want to come hang out?
I'm free.
What do you think, George? Should we let Chewy back on to us, or are we?
I've been good. I've been ever so good.
All right. That means all three of us will be back tomorrow night at 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Let me say this as well. If you're watching right now, if you want to help us, one of the things you can do is share our shit. Like whether it's the full conversation or whether you follow us on the YouTube channel down below or my Twitter feed in particular. You see a clip come up, share it around. We're growing slowly, which is cool. We're still kind of in that soft launch mode. And if you like what we do, the best thing you can do for us is to tell someone else about us. How about we do this? For everyone who's watching right now, tell one person tomorrow about us and then report back tomorrow night that you told someone about us. Or share one of our videos off Twitter tomorrow and tag us back in and we'll talk about it tomorrow night. It's the best way you can help. Or you could send us 100K or something to do this for a year. That would be another way you could do it, I guess. But a share is the same sort of value to me, in my opinion.
Oh.
All right, George. All right, Chewy. Thanks, team. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. Hooray, team.